it's a sort of downbeat comedy about a young wannabe musician called John, played by Domhall Gleeson, who joins a band, very strange, sort of avant-garde band led by Frank, who's played by Michael Fassbender, guy who wears this fake head all the time. And the film follows John's journey to kind of realize that perhaps he's not quite the talented musical person he thought he was at the beginning. The film now it's inspired by, rather than based on, Frank Sidebottom, and it's also inspired by lots of other outsider musicians. The character of Frank particularly is inspired by lots of other outsider musicians. And Frank Sidebottom is an interesting. He sort of doesn't fall into any particular category in that he's the creation of a comedian. He was, unlike say Beefheart or Zappa or other, Daniel Johnston particularly, who were not anybody's persona but were just themselves. So John Ronson, who was one of the writers along with Peter Strawn of the script, was in the Frank Sidebottom band in the 80s. He lived in Manchester and toured with the band for a while, and he wrote a memoir about his time in the band, and that was the beginning of thinking about this project. But I think very soon himself and Peter took the character in a completely different direction. So instead of having a Mancunian comedian who has an alter ego, we now have an American musician who, for his own deep reasons, can't live outside of this disguise or this mask. So he's not anybody's character. He's his own. He's the real person. I mean, part of the fun of the film is that Frank remains very hard to pin down. You have this shifting, difficult to determine central presence in the film, and a lot of John's time is spent wanting to penetrate the mask, literally, and also, I suppose, in a deeper sense, try to understand the source of Frank's capacities musically, and then just in a more basic way to find out who the guy is, and the audience are in the same position, and because of the kind of character Frank is, and he's mercurial, he has massive mood swings, he's unpredictable, he can be quite crazy and other times quite normal. The nature of the character is to not allow you to have it pinned down. What we learn about Frank at the end of the film, I suppose, is we learn a lot more about and it's not a great dramatic realization. It's kind of deliberately the opposite. You know, there's an aspect to this film which links to the Wizard of Oz story, where everybody projects huge power and amazingness onto the character of the wizard. And when the curtain goes back, he's revealed to be this ordinary, in fact, quite particularly ordinary person. The part of the journey of Frank is to pull the rug from underneath John's ideas of what a creative person must be like. And by hiding Frank through most of the film, you allow John to preserve those illusions through the body of the film, and then it's quite satisfying the way in which his ideas are recast at the end. The film is so unusual. There are lots of things that really excite me about it. In one sense, I was excited by the challenge of it, the combination of music and this quite particular kind of comedy which allows you to shift into darker territory as well. It's not a black comedy, not in that kind of smart arse way that idea for me. The idea of black comedy for me does contain a kind of smugness often. It's a generous type of comedy, but nevertheless it can be dark and moving. The idea of working with this, where in a situation where one of the main characters is hidden behind this mask, that challenge was really interesting, because it really forces you to think about the language of filmmaking. You know, when the face can't change, it's about how you, it's about how you block the scene. It's about how you shoot it, and what it is about the placement of the character, or the timing of when you see them, that tells you, that hints to you about what they're feeling, or allows them to do the job dramatically that they need to do in the scene. It also means casting somebody that's able to project a tremendous amount, even with that mask on. That was a challenge. I love slapstick. I love, and I love music, and I'm really interested in it, and those were the things. And it was a leap. I think, like, for everybody that got involved in this film, there's a point at which you go, this could be amazing, or it could be awful. It's one of those scripts. It's not the kind of film that you go, okay, well, if done reasonably well, it'll be reasonably good. No, if it's not done really well, if it's done really well, it'll be really good. If it's not done really well, it'll be awful. We used to say, when we were working on the script, we'd be saying, like, occasionally we talk about who might it be, and we just, like, you go down certain roads and think about particular people, with no idea at that point whether anybody major would want to do it, and also, I suppose, how hidden do you want your Frank to be? Once the person where underneath that head is a major name, then everybody knows already what that character looks like. So those were questions we asked ourselves a lot at the beginning. We started to think about people that we thought would have the kind of physical presence, and then what happened was that Michael independently had read the script, because I think somebody in his agency had seen it, and he just thought there was something in it. So when we talked, discovering that was kind of amazing, because I really wouldn't have thought that initially anyway, without thinking about it further. Now I really see, and very quickly I saw what it was and how he was feeling it and how it would work. But initially we kind of thought, wow, what an idea to have this face that everybody wants to photograph and film, and put it behind the head. And it's a testament to how interested in acting Michael is. Not being a star, but in being an actor. That challenge is appealing to him as well. There's a bruised, tender center to Frank. And in that sense, it's not like just some screwball comedy. There are ideas in it, and there are, I think emotionally it's quite a rich film. But it definitely harks back for me to stuff that was in Adam and Paul, for example. It's probably the closest film I've done before to Frank, in that there was a kind of a stylized comedic heart to Adam and Paul, even though it's very dark. Frank isn't remotely as dark as that. Frank remains a comedy, even though it does visit some other places along the way. But yeah, there are still threads that connect it to the work that I've done before. People, sometimes other people are better at seeing that than you are yourself as a filmmaker. People point to things out in what Richard did that I hadn't really seen, but which are very similar to things that are in the other films. So it may be that I've made a film more in keeping with the previous films than I think, but I may not be the best person to answer that question.